Welcome back, everybody, to the Stygian Study, where I talk about random things that I find funny, and you occasionally listen. Got a bit more of a rambly one today while I work on some other stuff that I'm really excited to share. So I wanted to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, the Soulsborne series, and the long-running debate it's had around its difficulty, with some people wanting an easier experience, while others wanting them to stay just as they are, and other people's wanting a more difficult experience still. And for a long time, this debate has circled around a bunch of dorks on the internet, dunking on each other, myself included, and screaming into the cybernetic void, just hoping someone will respond. But after playing some Night Rain and a replay of one of my favorite Fromsoft games of all time, I realized they accidentally crafted the perfect solution for the Fromsoft difficulty conundrum. That's right, baby, we're talking about Dark Souls 2. Woo! Yeah, the black sheep of the series. And, as I said, my personal favorite, or one of my personal favorites. Different story, different video for a different day. And before I get into the meat and potatoes of this, I just want to say I'm personally a fan of the Souls game's difficulty as is. Wouldn't advocate for an easy mode, especially in the trivial, arbitrary fashion that other games implement difficulty in, because difficulty in the Souls games is ultimately a storytelling device. But Dark Souls 2 does have easy mode features, and it works quite well. So if you've played Dark Souls 2, you know that its runbacks are of the devil. They're horrible. If you've gone through the Iron Keep to fight the Smelter Demon, it's one of the worst things in the entirety of video game history. And on top of its wacky level design choices, it's one of the major reasons people hate this game. I can't blame you. There's tight corridors with shit tons of enemies that are really difficult to kill, with wide-reaching attacks, all stacked on top of the fact that fog walls don't have iframes for some reason. And yeah, you get a recipe for, like, brutality and some not fun stuff. But Fromsoft was kind of smart, and to ease this pain for boss runbacks, they added this interesting mechanic where they limited enemy respawns to about, like, 12-ish enemy deaths in the overworld. Yeah, if an enemy dies 12-ish times, then they'll just stop respawning. Unless you're in the Champion's Covenant or you use a Bonfire aesthetic, but more on those in a second. And this creates this interesting loop where it's like, kind of the more you get stuck on a boss, the less you have to deal with the agonizing runbacks that the game is known for, which I think is pretty nice. Not only that, but DS2 is super kind with its summons that it offers for players to use. I can think specifically of the Surlon and Fume Knight fights, where there are two summons near the bonfire and boss entrance, where you can completely just skip the run back if you have them, and it makes it so the boss fight is just way easier because you have two other NPCs to deal with them. And DS2 bosses are not designed for multiple people. And I think this is a pretty good feature, because it's always nice to be able to have something that you can turn the boss difficulty down when you need it without arbitrarily just, like, making them giga weak. In fact, actually, I'd say sometimes those summons can make the fights way harder, especially in the Fume Knight, because if you summon those two NPCs, you're just fighting a Fume Knight with, like, 3 times the amount of HP, and he still does the same amount of damage, and these summons do no damage. They're pretty much there just to soak damage. Though it's not the only mechanic that DS2 uses. DS2 also has environmental factors that you can use to make certain fights easier. Chief one I can think of is the Baneful Queen, where you have to burn the windmill in the Earthen Peak to drain the pool of poison so you can stop getting poisoned during the entire fight, and makes it so she stops regaining health. The aforementioned Fume Knight also has a mechanic like this, where if you use the Smelter Wedges to destroy all the statues around his boss fight arena, he won't regain health, and it'll make the arena much wider for you to fight him in, which makes the fight way easier. DS1 also had these environmental factors, such as the Ceaseless Discharge, where if you just run away from the guy, his limbs get stuck in a rock and you can just start wailing on him for free. Or Nito, where you can equip holy damage weapons and insta-kill his skeletons so they never get back up, and it makes the fight a lot easier. Dark Souls has always had these methods of making fights easier through game knowledge. And I think, especially in Elden Ring, this is something that's been very much lost in the design of boss fights. Dark Souls 2 also has a way to increase the difficulty of the game as well by using the Champion's Covenant. I know it's not its full name, but that's just always how I refer to it. And when you join this Covenant, which is right at the start of the game, you can go to Majula, and I think you only have to get one extra item from Hyde's Tower of Flame to use it. But once you join the Covenant, it increases all the enemy's damage by 50%, decreases your damage by 20%, and makes you unable to summon spirits, and disables the enemy despawning measures that are present in the game. There are some arbitrary features there, but this is really meant for people who want a challenge run, which I think is actually pretty good. I think that's a fair thing to add into the game. I think having something like that for players who really want to test their skills, I think it's great. It's something that other games don't have. And all of this is bolstered by the New Game Plus mechanics and the Bonfire aesthetics mechanics that Dark Souls 2 has. If you aren't aware, Bonfire aesthetics, as I mentioned earlier, they are a tool that you can use and burn at bonfires that move an entire area up to New Game Plus 1. And in New Game Plus 1, there are new enemies, red phantoms, and new encounters, as well as new rewards for certain boss fights where you can get new weapons. And I think this is an incredible mechanic that hasn't ever been reused, especially because if you see in Dark Souls 2 in some speedruns, some people will just fight the Rotten like over and over and over and over again, and they'll farm him to get super strong and be able to just blaze through the game. I like mechanics like this. I think it allows for more knowledge and skill-based breaking of the game that isn't, again, as common in the other titles. Alright, now we move to Night Rain, the recent Fromsoft kind of success. It's a little bit of a black sheep. It depends on who you're talking to. I love this game. I've spent so many hours in this game already. It's an incredible experience, and I still play it pretty much daily. And for those who are in the know, FromSoft has recently added these new fights, the Dark Sovereigns, and essentially these are like the super bosses for the already existing Night Lords, and they rotate weekly. It's the third phase of a fight that you usually would only get 2 phases in, and as soon as you walk in, the boss is at the second phase, and then once they get down about like a quarter of their HP, they jump into their third phase. Oh my god, these things are no joke. Adele was a nightmare. I didn't even beat him, mainly because I also got busy, but I couldn't beat him in a 3-man squad. He has this new weird ability where he like shrinks the arena down to like a quarter of its size. They're sitting there with this big-ass monster, and you now have way less space to maneuver around. And for those who have fought him, know he's a bit of a nightmare, and he keeps moving around everywhere, and it makes him hard to attack, and he's super tanky. Fulgor has been the recent one that has launched, and he's a bit easier, but still, he's got some fucking crazy attacks like this one here. And these add a surprising amount of depth and challenge to bosses that have already existed, and I love this kind of mechanic. And there's still 6 more we haven't seen yet, and this is what sparked the idea for this video. Got me thinking, what if Souls bosses had more optional heroic modes? Think about it. Or at least this is what I was thinking about. If you took the Bonfire aesthetics, or even like a Champion's Covenant, imagine if you go to a certain fight and it adds an even more difficult version of the fight. So say you've beaten Radon, and you go to his site of grace, and you burn an item at that site of grace. Once you leave and come back, you will be able to fight a new souped-up Starscourge Radon that starts in Phase 2 and has his Phase 3, and he's got way more health, does way more damage, has a new moveset, and they could even try out new mechanics that they don't usually use in the Souls games. The potential is sitting, like, right there. And I really would like to see a mechanic like this, and I think the Souls community would like to see this too. And circling back to easy mode, we already have easy mode fights for Elden Ring with Spirit Summons mechanics. I know it's a bit of a controversial take, but it's kind of what they function as, and it's totally fine. You still had to beat the boss straight up, it just means you use some help, which, hey, most of us summoned Solaire for Ornstein and Smo back in the day. So I'd like to see the Spirit Summon mechanics get way expanded, and we don't have the Mimic tier. I kind of dislike that one. But this, combined with adding immersive weaknesses that can be exploited in the game, like they have in Night Rain, like if you hit Adele with poison, he starts having to puke out the poison, which stops him from running around so much, which is one of his major strengths as a boss. Or Fulgor, if you hit him with lightning damage, it disables one of his strongest attacks and stuns him for a little bit. These are weaknesses that can be exploited by players who pay attention and who gear up properly for certain fights, and I think this is something that has been lost in Elden Ring majorly. We should be rewarding players with moments like these for their good explorations, talking to NPCs, and using their creativity as much as it is just brute forcing bosses down with memorization and raw damage. And I think these difficulty options are really important. I know the Souls games, as I've stated, are known for their difficulty. What they are made for, it is one of the most important things, and I never think we should take that away. But I think we should have other ways of rewarding players for their devotion and skills in other manners than those who just have quick trigger fingers and are able to understand boss mechanics really easily. I think we should allow players to find for other ways to beat bosses, as we have in Dark Souls 1 and 2. I don't always think that how we've dealt with fights since Dark Souls 3 is really the best. I don't know. This was just a random idea I had the other day while I was playing through Elden Ring. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm definitely going to be talking more about the Soul series because there's a lot to talk about. But anyway, thanks for stopping by a quick visit at the Stygian Study. Have a good day, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are in the world. Toodles!